Thank you, Chair. It's now 7 o'clock. We're free to start the meeting.
Okay, can everyone hear me okay? Just wave your hands. Lovely. Welcome to the first meeting of the COVID-19 Response and Recovery Scrutiny Panel. Firstly, I'd like to thank Ashfield District Council for their foresight in setting up this vital committee. Right at the outset of this meeting, I would like to thank Mike Joy, Lynn Kane and Shane Wright for putting together this agenda in such a few weeks. I don't know if members appreciate quite the work that goes into it. So I think right at the outset, it's important to me to put on record my thanks to what I think is a great team. As ever, the meeting is being streamed live on YouTube. So good evening, and also to any interested viewers that might be joining us for this meeting. The agenda and associated papers for the meeting are all available on the council's website, www.ashfield.gov.uk. Can I please ask for patience should the meeting move at a slightly slower pace as we work through the agenda and deal with any possible technical issues along the way. To ensure audio for this meeting is clear as possible, we are muting all microphones as a default setting, basically to keep the background noise to a minimum. When you wish to speak, it'd be great if you could raise your hand like that and wait to be invited to speak by myself. Your microphone will then be unmuted and you'll be able to speak. I'm hoping that as many members as possible tonight will be able to speak, and certainly I will ensure that you get that opportunity. Members will be voting. You'll be voting by raising your hands to indicate that you're either in favour of the motion, against the motion, or wishing to abstain. So we'd like now to move to agenda item number 1, and that is to receive any apologies for absence. Can I ask if any apologies have been submitted?
No, we've had no apologies submitted, Chairman.
We've had no apologies. We look like a full house as well, which is great. Thank you very much, members. Agenda item number 2 then is to consider any declarations of disclosable pecuniary or personal interests and non-disclosable pecuniary or other interests. Can I ask if there's if members have got any declarations? Okay, we're all happy. Then we'll move on to agenda item number 3. The COVID Response and Recovery Scrutiny Panel was established at the 9th of July full meeting of this council, following recommendations made by Cabinet for the establishment of this panel. The purpose of this panel will be to review the council's response to the COVID-19 pandemic and take an active role in respect of the council's recovery plans. The report from pages 5 to 42 sets out the terms of reference for this panel as approved by council, guidance from the Centre for Public Scrutiny, and a summary of what the council has done to respond to COVID-19. We are very clear that this committee will not just be a talking shop. It will make deliverable recommendations to the council's cabinet, aimed at not just looking back at how, as a district council, we cope with lockdown, but what lessons can we learn from how we reacted to lockdown, what our preparations are, for example, for a second wave, and how we, as a local council, can look to protect residents and help existing businesses cope with the new world whilst looking to the future. The panel today is being asked to note the information contained in this report, review the council's initial response to the pandemic, identifying consequential impacts to the council, the local economy and the communities of this district. 3, we're asked to discuss and identify initial areas of focus for the panel, ensuring these areas are in line with the panel's terms of reference. And finally, we want to establish a work programme for the panel to assist the management of the panel's agenda and the scheduling of the panel's business. In attendance this evening, members, we have Ruth Dennis and the strategic lead on the council's COVID recovery. Firstly, as the new chairman of this vital committee, can I put on record my thanks to each and every council officer who went above and beyond the call of duty during lockdown. I think the work the council undertook to help and protect residents is worthy of the highest praise, and I'm sure members will agree with me. In this agenda, you will see examples of what the council did right, whether it be the only council in the whole of Nottinghamshire to provide a full bin collection service. And my thanks to the environment team who went well over and above, and some of them, put their lives in risk at uncertain times. I'd like to personally thank Charles Edwards, our current head of cemeteries, parks and streets, for going above the call of duty into my ward of Central and New Cross. He must have got absolutely sick and tired of my messages, sometimes 4, 5, 6, 7 a day. But he and his team never moaned and just got on with the job. I know that next week is the last one for Charles at our authority, and I'd like to personally thank Mr. Edwards for his vast contribution to keeping our open spaces tidy, whether that, as I say, be delivering a full bin collection service, maintaining our bulky waste collection, delivering the Bag It campaign, and making the preparations for the Skip into Summer campaign. My thanks to Mr. Edwards, and I wish him well in his new role in Derby, but forward to him returning to our authority as maybe a chief executive of the future. I'd also like to place on record my thanks to Helen Carlton Ashton and her customer service team. Between the middle of March and July the 3rd, her team dealt with an astonishing 40,000 inquiries from the public. Let me repeat that, 40,000 inquiries. I'm proud that Helen's team served us so well. Before I bring in Councillor Blagden, can I reiterate the praise given to the NHS by the last full council meeting? Richard Mitchell and his team at the Sherwood Forest NHS Hospitals Trust and the team at the University NHS Trust did a remarkable job putting their lives at risk. I look forward to welcoming people from the NHS, including Mr. Mitchell, to a future meeting, and thank him personally. I'd now like to ask my Vice Chairman, Councillor Jim Blagden, if you'd just like to make a couple of remarks. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and good evening, everybody. Before I start on what I've got to say, Chairman, I'd like the committee to think that the residents of Ashfield have been absolutely magnificent through this COVID lockdown thing. It's been awful. The way they've coped and the way they've stuck together and got through it has been magnificent. And I just hope that this committee can work in that same mould, that we can take a leaf out of their book and work together and come up with something really good. I really do. Because during this peak of the Corona-19 virus pandemic and throughout, the NHS have been our heroes. The strain they were under must have been huge. Chairman, after serving in the St John Ambulance for 28 years, and for a lot of those years as a first aid instructor, I have an understanding of the pressure the NHS was under, and I cannot thank them enough. Also, Chairman, the staff at Ashfield have been superb in their dedication and commitment in providing services for Ashfield community. The authority, thanks to them, is the only authority that kept Tier 1 and Tier 2 open. We have issued over £18 million in grants to 1,670 business owners across Ashfield. Now, hopefully we're in recovery. Already we have secured, or the authority has secured, £114,527 in funding from the Opening High Street Safety Fund that could be spent on support to develop an action plan to safely open the economies, communications and public information, business awareness, ensuring that reopening of local business can be managed. Already, Chairman, the office put secure workplace arrangements in place, pedestrian one-way systems, COVID secure signing, and sanitising stations, workstations, COVID hygiene keys, perspex screens. Chairman, our staff have been magnificent, and I cannot thank them enough. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Blagden. And I'm now going to bring Mike and Shane in, just to provide an overview of this panel's role in the council's recovery process. So I don't know if Mike or Shane, who wants to go first.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So throughout the pandemic, the Centre for Public Scrutiny has released a number of guides which sets out the importance of continued and robust member-led scrutiny throughout the response, but particularly for the recovery period. I just want to say scrutiny has a key role in reviewing the response so far, shaping what recovery actually looks like and engaging the community. For this first meeting, we've had a number of pre-meetings looking at how to ensure that we have a structured approach that can deliver. It's important for members to scope out the forthcoming work of the panel, set the scene and establish what priority areas for consideration they want to review. This will be informed by not only the reactive and responsive work that's already detailed in the report, which I know Ruth Dennis is going to talk through shortly, but also from your wards, your areas, what your constituents have told you. So I think from our angle in supporting this, scrutiny really does have a role in influencing the future recovery work, identifying what lessons we've learned and considering what actually happens next. If I can, Chair, I'll bring Shane in at this moment.
Thank you very much, Shane.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mike, as well. I just want to make a couple of points for the panel. I think, Chairman, Vice Chair, Mike have set out the purpose of the committee, really well, and hopefully it's clear to anyone watching now and all members of the panel. I just want to make one point on the sort of the practicalities of this panel and how it's going to work, and how sort of the work of the panel will be reported to the executives of cabinet, the people that make the decisions at the council. Mike, I'm not sure if you've got, if you can share your screen with the dates of the proposed meeting dates for the panel. Just quickly, yeah. So just to, as Chairman mentioned, we want to make sure that we are this panel is coming up with deliverable outcomes really for Ashfield in respect of COVID-19. And one thing that we're trying to do is make sure our meeting dates align with cabinet dates. So essentially, after every meeting that this panel has, the chairman, the vice chair, myself, Mike, anyone else on the panel that wishes to can go to cabinet, keep cabinet informed of the work that we've been doing. Hopefully, come up with those deliverable outcomes that we so much want, and we want this panel to be, really positive and work well with the other sort of partners and the council and in the council's recovery plans. So there's some proposed dates. I think we'll be maybe discussing those a little bit later in terms of members actually voting on them. One other aspect I just wanted to touch on quickly for members is, I know it's been mentioned about, involving the community in this, and it's one thing that, the guidance that we've got from as officers regarding the role of scrutiny in the COVID-19 recovery is, we need to be a contact point between the community and the council, make sure their issues are present. And I would really like to encourage you all as members to be in constant contact with the electorate, with the public that you represent. If you could be proactive during this, myself and Mike will do the same behind the scenes. For future meetings, we'd like to get comms involved and make these meetings, almost interactive with the public, let them have their say whilst we have our discussions. But again, I would really like to encourage members to, bring the views of the public to the panel, alongside anything else that we consider, such as the information in this report. I think that's imperative really for the work that this panel will do. And I'll pass it back to you now, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Shane. Have you got anything else to add to that, Mike? Or
not really, Chair. I think as we get into this discussion, obviously, in terms of we have 2 meetings of this panel planned before the next cabinet meeting date. What, as kind of Shane has already pointed out, having those meetings aligned with cabinet meeting dates, we're going to actually suggest that an update from the COVID-19 Scrutiny Committee is a standing item on the cabinet agenda, which will allow for that timely response upwards from this panel, whether that be any suggestions, whether that be any formal recommendations, or whether that be any feedback from the community, that will allow us to actually fit in with every cabinet date and ensure that this panel is actually being listened to and being heard, and not 3 months later or having to wait a length of time before we've got the opportunity to send that to cabinet. So that was the reasoning behind the setting of those provisional dates, was to tie in specifically with cabinet in a real timely way.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Just before I bring Ruth in, just to say that the establishment of this committee has been welcomed by the Centre for Public Scrutiny and indeed the LGA. Different councils are dealing with it in different ways. I know that Nottinghamshire County Council held their first meeting of their COVID recovery version last week, which was looking at issues like, for example, PPE problems in the social care system. Other councils have changed the names of their scrutiny committee, so some of their sort of place and communities committees have now been turned into it, and in other councils have basically renamed cabinet members to basically call them COVID recovery cabinet members. And it was our view as an authority, and as you know from the full council meeting, and as you know, echoed by the cabinet, you know, it was important in terms of, you know, our scrutiny, our current scrutiny panel scrutiny, the scrutiny committee and scrutiny A and B are currently looking at some crucial issues. So it was felt that we didn't want to disable the good work of this council and the scrutiny, and that's why we're here. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Ruth, who is going to talk us through the report. Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. You've got quite a detailed report in front of you, so I'm not going to go through every single bit of that report in a lot of detail. But what I will try to do is bring out some of the main points, specifically around response, firstly, really with a view that the panel can start to think about how it will help the authority kind of learn lessons from the initial phase of the response to the COVID pandemic, how we can maybe improve on some of those things, be that internally, locally, or maybe put pressure to bear at a more county-based or a national level, so that we are obviously prepared for a potential second wave, or obviously a potential local outbreak. And the second approach for the panel to consider is obviously to look at the council's recovery strategy, which is attached to the report and which was approved by Cabinet, and be involved in shaping what that recovery looks like, particularly engaging with communities, as Shane has said, to ensure that we are taking on board the views, the comments, the impacts that have actually taken place out there with your constituents. So firstly, just looking at response, there are two different ways that the council has responded to the pandemic. The first one is in relation to its involvement at a county level as a responder under civil contingencies legislation. As part of that, the council sits on what's called the Nottinghamshire Local Resilience Forum, which is a very long-winded way of a multi-agency group being able to respond to major incidents. Those groups are set up at all sorts of different times, quite often around flooding incidents, for example. But obviously, the pandemic is something that we've never seen before, and I'm sure a lot of us wish that we don't see again. But there's a big structure across the county which we're part of to make sure that across Nottingham and Nottinghamshire, we are responding appropriately to a major incident, which is what the pandemic became in March time. As part of that, we have what's called a strategic coordinating group. So that looks at everything from quite a high level and monitors to ensure that those multi-agencies are actually responding appropriately to the incident. And since February, I've sat on that group. It consists of, for example, representatives from the police, all the districts, the city, the county, health representatives, the universities, and we also have the opportunity to hear from government advisors as well. Underneath that, there's quite a complicated structure which the council has again taken part in, covering things such as health, humanitarian support, economy and financial support, communications, and obviously a dedicated local authority group. And they're the groups that have tried to ensure a consistent approach across the county to ensure that there's been, for example, enough PPE and how that's been distributed. And certainly the local authority cell is one that we've been heavily involved in. And that's obviously looked at our critical functions, the tier 1 and tier 2 services, which is an appendix to the report. And they're the services that all districts felt it was the kind of the minimal essential service delivery to maintain throughout the pandemic. And as the chair and as the vice chair have already mentioned, you know, the council was very successful in ensuring that we continue to maintain all those services during the pandemic and continue to do so as the pandemic carries on. Underneath that, we then have our own structure internally and obviously our own internal responses as well. So we have an officer group, which is called an incident management team. And we make sure that messages are given out across the whole of the authority in a very consistent way, so that we all know what it's our role to do. And I think, again, you know, we've demonstrated throughout that we've used that structure in a very, very organised, sensible and coordinated way across the council to ensure that we've been able to carry on with all our services throughout the pandemic. You know, we've had to be very flexible and reactive and adaptive throughout the pandemic. You know, messages from government were changing on a daily, hourly basis. Very much at the start of the pandemic in sort of March, we were having to react very, very quickly to changing environments. And, you know, that was a very sort of stressful time for the officers. But because we had a really good structure in place, we coped with that, I think, very, very well. And a number of you have already commented, I think, on how well the authority has managed through that response phase. I think in terms of the approach, it's been very structured, and we have ensured that we've been able to deal with all the other additional responsibilities that have been placed upon us as a part of government guidance as well. Things like the humanitarian aid that we provided. So that was things like the food parcels, talking to the voluntary sector, welfare checks, welfare telephone calls, and obviously things like the grant systems, which were very complex and obviously involved considerable amounts of money. In terms of some of those services, they are detailed in quite a lot of detail in the report, so I won't go through each of those in turn, but there are a few additional movements, I think, and updates that I can provide since the report was produced. I think Councillor Blagden made reference to the business, small business rates and retail hospitality and leisure grant funding, and the current, I think, payment out as of the end of last week was just over £18.1 million. About 1,682 businesses have been assisted with that funding. And since the report was produced, we've also been made aware of a third tranche of government funding of an additional £260,000, which will take our funding in total to date to £1.6 million in terms of being able to meet additional costs and loss of income as a direct result of the pandemic. I think in terms of what the response is doing currently, both internally and across the county, is making sure that we are now prepared for that potential second wave or a potential local lockdown. I think because we've managed and structured things in such a way during the initial response phase, most of those structures, both across the county but also internally, will still be there. And I think the phrase that we're currently sort of talking about is that some of those structures are going to be in a hibernation mode. So they won't be active, but they will be there so that they can be reintroduced as quickly as possible and as soon as possible once we're aware that we need to react to either a local outbreak or a national outbreak. So I think there's comfort in the way that we've delivered that so far, comfort in the fact that those structures will continue. But obviously there are some additional structures in place and plans in place for local outbreaks. And the county and the city are responsible for producing and publishing local outbreak plans. And they are obviously in place, they're publicly available, and they explain what will happen in the event of a local outbreak. As a district council, we are involved in some of those structures, and particularly our environmental health officers are involved at an operational level in terms of the potential for a localised outbreak, which could be quite small, but also could be much larger. And there's been some exercises across the county around that this week. So that's just demonstrating the fact that we are continuing to ensure that we are prepared if this happens either to Ashfield or to the county. And one of the important things around that is actually learning from other authorities. And in particular, there is a lot of learning in place, both that we're being provided from the government, but also locally from what's happened, for example, in Leicester. There's been a lot of work by the Local Resilience Forum communications cell across the county to make sure it's prepared in the event that we've got to get messages out to people, you know, in a very active and positive way in the event that something like this happens locally. So I think that's the response, which has now moved, as I say, from that very active phase into a preparedness phase. What we're also doing at the same time is obviously looking towards recovery. So clearly now we're having to look at what the impacts of COVID have had on the communities, the businesses, obviously the council, particularly the council's finances, and obviously the different ways of working and the well-being of our staff. So all of that is really important as part of the council's approach to recovery. Cabinet did approve a recovery strategy, and that's attached to the report. And it's at a high level, it's broken down into two strands. Ashfield as a place, so the community and the economic recovery. And the second strand is the council, and that's the organisational recovery. You know, how will the council need to change its services as a result of COVID? What new services maybe we required to continue over a long period of time? As I said, the impacts on our finances and the impacts on our employees and the way that we've been working very differently. Obviously things like virtual meetings, remote working from home, etc. So we'll be looking at all of those things going forward to evolve into a plan in terms of how we ensure that the district of Ashfield can recover from the pandemic into whatever comes as what often is being called the new normality. And this is, I think, really where Scrutiny can add significant value to our plans, and particularly by reference to its involvement and engagement with communities. We've recently drafted an engagement strategy which was approved at Cabinet recently, and I think that will form the basis for how we can produce, potentially if committee thinks it's the panel thinks it's a good thing to do, is to develop a communication strategy, I think, and an engagement strategy. I think that was referred to earlier on in the meeting. I think what we need to also Reassure Committee is that we've obviously looked at how we can embed that recovery strategy into our corporate plan. So the corporate plan has been reviewed to take account of recovery, and that again was recently approved by Cabinet. So that all the strands of recovery are now forming part of our monitoring and monitoring systems and performance management around our corporate delivery. And we've also updated our corporate risk strategy again through Cabinet recently to ensure that we are aware of what our increased risks are as a result of COVID, but what we can do to mitigate that. And certainly one of the things that the Cabinet wished to do was create this panel as one of those ways of trying to assist us to mitigate the long-term impacts of COVID, both in the community and across the council internally as well. So, Chair, I think that's probably everything from me at the moment in terms of the report and a brief outline of response and recovery. Happy to take questions or give further comments later on. But I do think, you know, it's important for this panel to start sharing, I think, some of its experiences in terms of personal experiences and the experience of their constituents in terms of service delivery through the response phase, but also the impacts that it's had on your constituents, and use that to help you form what your priorities are to feed into your panel's work plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ruth. I'd like to now open it up to questions. So if you'd like to indicate if you'd like to ask Ruth any questions. Okay, I've got Dave Shaw, then Jim Blagden. Dave, can I bring you in? Councillor Shaw?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Chair?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks. Fantastic overview, that, Ruth. My biggest fear of this is that COVID's not going to go away. People out there are going to get really concerned towards Christmas, and especially into the winter months. We as local representatives of the people, if there is a local lockdown or a potential outbreak in the area, are we going to get notified before the media does, or are we going to be left behind as per usual by the county? Thank you.
Thank you. I think that, as I say, you know, we can't predict what the county do. What I will say is that, you know, I mean, it's very difficult to be critical of the county council over the past. The only criticism I would have was the difficulty in getting in touch with, you know, the magic number, you know, the 0300 580. I think that probably drove part of the 40,000 inquiries to our customer services department. But anyway, Ruth, do you want to answer those points?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think that the districts and boroughs are embedded in the local outbreak plan process, and as excuse me, as a result of that, we will have involvement at an early stage as soon as there are the data is fed through to our public health, Director of Public Health at a county or a city level. And they will obviously, there are meetings that take place, I think, daily in terms of monitoring what's happening around some of that data across the whole of the county. That data obviously comes from a national point, and that's used to monitor movements in data. And we're seeing that, I think, now because we're getting things like they're calling it the watch list. So the watch list is going to be published, I think, on a weekly basis. We were informed by our government liaison officer earlier this week at one of the strategic meetings that I go to confirm that councils will get information and a heads up before that is published. So we've been given reassurance that that will happen. We weren't told a time frame for that, but we were given reassurance that we would have information available to us before it goes public. And I think it's fair to say the government have learned quite a lot from the situation that we all saw in Leicester, where you know, that there was a lot in the media before. I think that, you know, the mayor was saying that he'd not been given information. So we are being reassured that there has been a lot of learning at a government level from the example in Leicester. But what we're also doing, the communications cell across the Nottinghamshire group is doing a lot of work to ensure that once those messages come through to the Director of Public Health, those messages are ready to go out at a local level to the communities in terms of whatever the data is showing. So I think, I understand your concerns because we've seen some of that, but we are being reassured that we will get information before it happens.
Thank you, Ruth. Before I bring in Councillor Blagden, is there anyone else that would like to speak? If you just indicate now. There we go. So Councillor Rostons. So I'll bring in Councillor Blagden and then Councillor Rostons. Please, Councillor Blagden.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think Ruth actually has partially answered what I was going to ask, because I know the government were under great stress and they were reacting to what the situation was happening around them with the COVID-19, and it was in a situation which I think no other government's ever been in, so it was a learning curve for them as well as us. And I know the communications weren't great, and I was just wondering if it was going to get better. And I think you've already said it is, so I think you've answered it. But if you just want to clarify that.
Ruth?
Thank you, Chair. I think certainly in the early days of the pandemic, we probably as officers were quite frustrated that we were not getting information through speedily. We were, it has to be said, generally finding out about things as part of the, the daily public news announcements when the rest of the public were made aware of them. So I think a lot of people probably assumed that councils were getting prior information, and very early on that wasn't the case. And I think that was my reference earlier to the fact that we were having to be reactive. We were having to just react overnight to what had been announcement the previous evening. So I think there was some frustration at an early stage, and also there was a feeling at times that the guidance or the instructions were confused or conflicting, I think, sometimes. And so I think that did create some concern for us. But some of the structures we had, like the local authority cell, was really useful because all local authorities were able to talk to each other, so we could take a consistent message through, or as consistent a decision as possible, subject to obviously local variation. So I think that structure has really helped us across the county to act not necessarily all as one, but certainly in the same direction, and really compare and contrast what we were all interpreting that government guidance as. So I think very early on it was difficult. Having said that, I think Councillor Bowden, as you said, we are in unprecedented times. There's no blueprint to how to react to this, and so it was so difficult for government to probably do much else other than that. And I have to say that as we've gone through, that information channel has improved and has become much more available to us at an earlier stage rather than at the last minute. So I think there's been a journey in terms of that, and we have got a lot of information out there for local authorities now on the government website. So I think government has learned throughout it in terms of trying to improve its communications in a very difficult situation.
Thank you, Chair. Before I bring in Councillor Rostons, Councillor Kevin Rostons, can I just say that we're all very proud that Councillor Rostons was the chairman of Nottinghamshire County Council, and I know that this pandemic interrupted his year as the civic head of the county. I also know that Councillor Rostons did use his influence to make sure that Ashfield's voice was heard at the county. So I'd like to put on record my thanks to Councillor Rostons, and also for your kind words after the death of our former chairman, Councillor Brewer. So I'd like to bring in Councillor Kevin Rostons.
Thank you, David. Yes, he was Captain was a mate of mine. Proud to be so. Yes, wonderful fella. Yeah, wonderful fella. Ruth's right. They are getting better. I've had meetings with health and wellbeing and the old Scrutiny, and it's the track and trace is getting better, and they are being more inclusive now. The problem I think they've had is the information they are getting. If they've got information about different areas, do they put it out there and cause panic in that area, or what they do with it? I think the part of it being is, if they know that they've got an outbreak in a certain area, by passing it on to through various channels, it could cause more concern than by actually doing what they are supposed to be doing and containing that in that area, and bringing out the testing stations and the monitoring stations in the areas that are affected. So, but they are now realizing that everything is, we can't go through this unless we work together. That is all the councils, all the health panels and the rest of it, unless we actually work together through this, because as Jim said, it's something totally unprecedented. The effect that it's having is not just now, it will last forever. It will last a lifetime, and things will change for a lifetime. We've mentioned the funding for the high streets, but we've already got some funding for the high streets to reinvent the high streets, but they need to be totally looked at. We've got the funding there to do something with, but with all that's gone off, with all the people buying off the internet, etc., and the everything that's happened, I think we need to totally look into that. Ruth mentioned that the staff, and the staff have been amazing, absolutely amazing, and I've been spoken to quite a number of them, and they've been truly amazing all the way through this. They've been tremendous. But the people struggling with mental health issues because of this will again be everlasting. It's something that we need to work on as a council, for our staff, for our members. It's not going to go away. It's not going to go away. And the effect it's having on not just businesses, but David and probably a lot of the councillors are involved in volunteering, and this county couldn't, this country couldn't go without volunteers. The effect it's having on volunteers and charities is, some will not recover. Some will not recover. So I don't know what we're doing on that side of things, Ruth. I mean, it's a massive task what we've got, and we can't be all things to all people. But you know, the Citizens Advice and other people have been so busy throughout this. Part of your team, David, you know, he's got to look into everything it's touched, and it's touched so many things and so many people in different ways that. But I'm happy to be on board with you. I've always got on with you, and I'm happy to work together with all of you. So it's a massive task we've got here, and let's do the best for the people of Ashfield. Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. And you're right. I mean, you know, one of the things that we're going to discuss our work programme later. So I will take that on board. Your concerns about town centres and businesses. You know, as a council. We have worked very hard to make sure, for example, that Ruth mentioned the £18.1 million that had been paid out. It's all well and good getting.
Oh yes, yeah.
But it's a different matter making sure that goes to the right people. So I think 90% of businesses that are entitled to have now got it. And I know that we did have concerns of the second tranche. I think it was £1.1 million, and we had concerns about the high level of property on costs that meant that companies that were based at home and sole traders weren't eligible. They just fell through the cracks. But you know, these things happen, and we will go through the work programme. But Ruth, I don't know if you want to sort of anything that Councillor Rostons has mentioned there.
Thank you, Chair. I think certainly those are the sorts of things that I'd hope would form part of that work plan for more detailed scrutiny at later meetings. I think in terms of certainly from a staff perspective, we've been very aware, I think, of ensuring that we've tried to assist officers with their mental health and their well-being throughout the lockdown, and are continuing to do so. You know, we are very aware that we have officers who've now worked from home for a very considerable amount of time, for example, who might be worried about coming back into the office. So we are putting a lot of measures in place to try to reassure staff around that. For example, we've been sending messages out on an almost daily, certainly weekly basis, helping people with just practical guidance around how to work from home, how to keep yourself safe while working from home, having regular breaks. We've given information around sort of mindfulness and things like that to try and help people with those softer issues, because we are aware that people are feeling anxious at home, people are worried about that. And that's not just, we appreciate that's across the whole of the district. There are lots of that, but certainly we've focused on trying to protect and help our staff as much as possible, and trying to reintroduce some people into the office, but on a very gradual basis. We've got access to something called PAM Assist, which is one of our welfare wellbeing links into counselling and support services, and they've been made available to staff if they wish to choose to take that offer up throughout that. So it is something we've been very, very mindful of throughout the whole of the pandemic, and are continuing to do so with our staff. And that again is something I'd encourage you to include on the work plan to look at in terms of what we've done so far, and also what we might want to do going forward. We've had a survey undertaken internally across the authority as part of that as well, to try and understand how people are feeling as a result of the pandemic and different working arrangements. So we've done quite a bit already, but there's lots more to do.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ruth. Is there any other members that would like to speak? I'm just scrolling through. Councillor Wilkinson, anything to add? Okay. Councillor Grounds, would you like to speak? Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Grounds.
Just in query of the businesses, I've been through quite a few of the businesses in my constituency that have done a very good job of becoming COVID secure. Are we doing anything as the council to reward those businesses?
Ruth, do you want to answer that one?
I'm not aware of anything. That may be a question I can take back to Teresa Hodgkinson, who is our lead director in relation to business and economy. So I'll be glad to take that back, Councillor.
Yeah, because I mean, I've seen some really fantastic setups from some of the businesses.
I mean, if you also want to send that in through to us as well, to highlight the ones that you've seen, that would be really helpful as well, Councillor Grounds.
Yeah, no
happy
problem.
to take
Thank
that
you.
back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grounds. And I mean, I know that, for example, a lot of businesses have faced challenges, and you're right, Councillor Grounds. They've gone way and above, and they've made sure that they send a clear message to the residents of this district that they're open for business, but they value resident safety, and that's why we've been so vocal on our Shop Small campaign, our Shop Local campaign, to encourage people out of the supermarkets and into small businesses. And it's great to see the district come alive again. Although, to be fair, I've not been down to that Barbers in Kirkby. You're usually dressed up as Spider-Man outside there, but I know that they've certainly what they call, Dale,
Twisted Tinks.
So I know that they've gone way and above what they need.
They've spent a lot of their own money to make everything secure. Also, New Age Vapes, just a vape shop, is pretty much like a bank now, where they've got a massive screen across and microphones to talk to the customers. They spend thousands to make sure they're COVID secure as well. So it'd be nice to reward them for what they've done.
I would hope that the residents of Ashfield and beyond recognise that, and I mean, there is shops, unfortunately, that have not followed social distancing, and it may be. I mean, we'll be discussing an NHS People's Memorial later. But it may be that we look at some way, and I think it's a good suggestion of yours, Councillor Grounds, is that we look at some way of recognising businesses and residents, for that matter. We've already talked about volunteers who've gone over and above to make sure that they provide a service that keeps our residents safe here in the district. Okay, Councillor Smallridge, did you want to add anything? Just unmute yourself, John.
All right.
Go. There you go.
It's good to see that this has gone beyond politics and that we're all working together with the people who are employed as well. And one thing that has been mentioned to me is the homeless strategy. Has it worked so far? And have we got a plan if it doesn't? You know, if there's another second wave or a local outbreak, is there another plan, or has it worked so far and it's fixed the situation? That's the question.
Certainly, thanks, Councillor Smallridge. And just to say that I agree, you know, I'm the least political person I know, and you know, I welcome a committee that leaves politics at the door. You know, I'm going to bring in Ruth to answer that specific query about the homeless strategy before I bring Mike in. Okay, Ruth.
Thank you, Councillor Smallridge. Thank you for the question. I think some of this was done in terms of a local approach, but there was also county involvement as well, with additional funding from government, which assisted in some provision for additional homeless refuges and accommodation, certainly during the lockdown, when obviously there was the encouragement of everyone who was a rough sleeper or a homeless person obviously having somewhere to stay. So there was a lot of work done during that very initial phase of lockdown, again at a county level through the local authority cell, which then came down to each of the district areas. I think in the report there's reference to the fact that we had something like 90 assessments around housing options during that kind of lockdown phase. So my understanding is that the provisions work quite well. My understanding is that there's some additional funding coming forward from government to try to continue with some additional homelessness provision for a longer period of time. And I know that there's some particular concerns as we hit the winter. So I think that's work in progress, Councillor Smallridge, in terms of a longer term approach. And that's certainly, again, something that Paul Parkinson would be able to give you far more detail on at the next meeting than I can, but there are certainly plans to ensure that there's a continuation of that, being mindful of obviously the funding requirements.
Okay, thank you, Ruth. Is there any other members that would like to query anything that Ruth has said or raise any issues before I bring Mike in? No? Okay, Mike, you're on.
Thank you, Chair. It was just to add to Councillor Brown's point really as well, with regards to the businesses and the steps they've taken to still provide. Just to add to that, a lot of these businesses have also become involved in the humanitarian aspects. So in terms of the people that we're working with, they've been donating food, they've been donating objects and everything else. So in terms of recognising that community spirit, it's even though facing struggles as they may have done as a business, I think we'll learn throughout the review as well of the extra steps that some of those businesses have actually taken to actually give back and participate in the humanitarian aid, and working with the council and some of our other partner agencies in delivering that humanitarian aid.
Thank you, Mike. Is there anybody else before we move on to what we need to agree at the meeting and look at the terms of reference of the work programme? Is there anything else that anyone would like to raise? Dave, is there anything that's on the edge of you? Anything, Dave Shaw? Councillor Shaw?
We've got Councillor Wilkinson with a hand up, Chair.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Wilkinson. I didn't see you there. It's lovely to see you, by the way. Councillor Wilkinson, sorry.
Okay, hi there. It's just one thing. I haven't actually been into Sutton for quite a while now, and I know that there is some businesses who are actually struggling, and people would say they're failing on the social distancing and that. Is there any possibility that we could get businesses that are doing good practice to help the ones that are struggling, whether we can actually look into something like that so we can make all the businesses like under one umbrella, so we can help them, and that the more positive shop people can actually help the ones who are struggling.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. And you're right, you know, it's absolutely imperative that people have the confidence to go out and shop in our town centres and look after small traders. And maybe I think you come up with a good suggestion in that we look at good practices, Councillor Grounds raised before, and maybe maybe that's something that Trev Middleton, for example, may wish to take on board, and I shall email him based on that. Okay, Ruth, is there anything you want to add to Councillor Wilkinson's comments? Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. That's certainly something I'll take back to, again, Teresa Hodgkinson, who's our lead officer in relation to that. And we've also been working with environmental health. They've obviously been working quite closely with businesses to provide advice and guidance. So it's certainly that we can add that to the work programme, and we'll take that back through to Teresa, as she may be aware of schemes already that enable that to take place, but it's not something I'm personally aware of at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Ruth. Well, just to move this meeting on, and thank you. I think that was a very good debate, and thank you to Ruth for answering all our questions. It's greatly appreciated, and I know that Ruth will be very happy if anyone has any questions that they've not thought of. You know, Ruth would be very happy for you to email them over. What we need to do now, panel, is to agree various things. So what we need to agree is the panel meeting day. So Mike shared before. I'm going to take these individually. So Mike shared before the dates. So he's going to share them again now. So as Mike has said, we're feeding directly into the cabinet. So what we'll be doing is making certain concrete recommendations, and they will go as soon as practically possible to the cabinet. So you'll notice that's why the 2 dates are there. So the next meeting day is the 3rd of September. That's going to feed into the cabinet at the 15th of September. The next meeting after that is the 6th of October, then the 5th of November. Let's hope there's no fireworks that night. And the next one is the 10th of December. I'm asking the panel to agree those dates, or to indicate if anyone has any issues with them. Councillor Blagden?
No, I'm just going to move that we accept them, Chairman.
Okay, I just want to give anyone, does everyone, have we got a seconder for that then, if Councillor Blagden's moved it? Councillor Shaw is going to second that, and Councillor Rostons and Councillor Wilkinson, thank you. So it's been moved and seconded. Can we accept those dates, if you'd like to indicate? Okay, I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much. So Mikey, we can put those through. We'd now like to discuss the work programme, as I mentioned before, panel, that we wanted to make sure that we were dealing with issues that concern residents, and I must make it very clear that things are moving daily. Advice is changing daily, so the work programme we want to make sure is as fluid as possible, and we want to ensure that we're dealing with the issues that residents are concerned about. So, for example, we may move to deal with a second spike or a local lockdown or whatever. But what I wanted to do was just have a brief chat about what the panel members thought about subjects that we should be raising. So, for example, thank you, Mike, for sharing that. Seamless, this. The next meeting and what we were anticipating was talking about the local recovery themes, and we were going to invite all senior service directors from the council to attend that meeting, whether it's virtually or in Ashfield District Council is unclear. It would probably be virtual, but so we can sort of hone down into some of these some of the local issues. So, for example, Paul Parkinson may wish to discuss the challenges that he's had within his housing department, who I believe have performed very well. Teresa Hodgkinson may wish to talk about the effect on communities and how the council have had to adapt, blah, blah, blah. And so that's going to be at the next meeting. The one thing that has been clear, I mentioned before, the 40,000 people that have been in touch with various inquiries from the council and to the council from March the 16th to July the 3rd. And one of the things that residents strongly have been recommending to the council is that we look at a permanent memorial to the NHS, and I'd like to put that on the agenda. We call it a people's memorial because at the end of the day, this is not up to us as members. This is a district thing. We want community buy-in, and we want to work with schools, we want to work with residents, and so there's a job to do with our comms team. So what we want to do at the next meeting is just hone in on that and formalise things so we can make a recommendation to the next cabinet to get that ball rolling. So that's that. Is there anything else for the work programme? Mike, did you want to say a few words?
Thank you, Chair. So just to kind of clarify with the draft that was just shared on screen. So we thought it was prudent, i.e. yourself and the Vice Chair thought it was prudent that actually we have an overview from each of the service directors. And then also beneath that, we obviously will take a steer from this panel about the information if members are happy for us to work with place and communities and exploring some initial information and implications of the development of a people's NHS memorial. So looking at whether it's viable, looking at the costs, where those costs would come from, how we'd engage the community in that process, looking at so the top line theme was the next attendees is the service directors who have all been allocated a theme, which is you'll see it on page 23 of your report. So each service director has been assigned an area, a local recovery theme. So we thought actually that top line from those, then as a second agenda item, if you as a panel want us to explore, is obviously an initial discussion and scoping around the implications, the costs, etc. of that people's memorial. The dates after that we've left free for now, because what we're hoping is that actually the discussions at each of those meetings will generate actually the theme for the next meeting. In such a fast-paced and moving era that we're in with the pandemic, things are changing very, very quickly, and taking on board Councillor Rostance's discussion with regards to obviously the local businesses and everything. If we get that top line and give members the opportunity to actually pose some of those questions at this next meeting as part of that wider discussion, we can then drill down and actually focus in on those areas that members want to see. So the work plan will operate with a large degree of flexibility and will be controlled by you as a panel. You will be the ones coming forward and saying, well, actually, this has become abundantly clear during this discussion. We need to focus in on that. So I just wanted to explain the gaps in that draft work plan, Chair.
Thank you very much. Is there any comments on the draft work plan? Councillor Rostance.
Sorry, I mean, I recognise the NHS memorial, David, but there's been so many people that's sort of come out and done wonderful work. You know, the people in the care homes, etc. Our staff. I don't know if we're going far enough with an NHS memorial.
Well, I mean, I'm very happy. Yeah, I'm very happy to. I mean, I'm aware that when we first started clapping for the NHS, it sort of transpired into key workers. So that could be someone working at Aldi, that could be someone collecting the bins, that could be the NHS people's was just a discussion point, Castle. Yeah. I'm very happy to.
These people have done, they've been wonderful. The people of Hucknall and Ashfield totally have been wonderful, from people working the food banks to our staff. Yeah, they have been absolutely phenomenal.
I totally agree. So if you propose then, I mean, we could call it a COVID.
I'm not taking away from the NHS. I'm just sort of.
I totally agree with you. So maybe that's something that you know, would the panel agree to call it I don't know, a COVID memorial for key workers? Key workers memorial. There we go. Would that be Councillor Rosters? Fine. Okay. Councillor Blagden, did you want to raise anything to do with the work programme?
Yeah, I'm quite happy to support Councillor Roston. Something a memorial is a memorial. If we put one up, it could be to the NHS and everybody else who was involved, the community. What goes on it, it'll be there for everybody to see. So yeah, COVID memorial is fine. I've got no problems with that. I've got no problems with the work programme, and the agenda we've set out is fine, because the next agenda hopefully will be picked out and put forward by the members of the panel.
Correct. Yeah. Okay, Councillor Grounds.
Yeah, I was just thinking, if we're going to memorialise the stuff that the key workers and the NHS has done, is there anything we can do for the children that have been absolutely fantastic during all of this?
Yeah, I mean, you know, certainly, you know, it's important as a council to recognise anybody that gave a contribution within the COVID-19 lockdown, and I especially know yourself, Councillor Grounds. You know, you've got certain challenges, and you know, I bet Reece has been wonderful, hasn't he? I bet, is he bored of you yet?
He's bored of me. Yeah, it's been a holiday for him.
Well,
holiday.
I know that you know, from the children. From people that kept our schools going for key workers, for our bin men, our environmental staff that put their lives at risk. Because don't forget, you know, whilst other councils across the country were axing services left, right, and centre, Ashfield stood firm, and it had the buy-in from our excellent staff. And I agree that it's probably too narrow. It's important, as the no notice of motion to the July council meeting at Ashfield District Council did praise the NHS and people that worked in care homes, but it is broader than that. You're right, it's been a massive effort right across the district, and you know, we should recognise that. Councillor Blagden, did you want to add anything?
We've got Councillor Shaw as well.
Okay, so I'll take Councillor Blagden and then Councillor Shaw.
Yeah, the children of Ashfield will be involved, hopefully, in designing this memorial. Yeah. So one way they will be involved big time, Dale. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Shaw.
Cheers, thanks, Chair. I'm sorry I keep breaking out of here because it's the signal here at this end. I see this as a people's memorial. It's for everybody. We call it the People's Memorial. You're encompassing everyone that's been involved, whether it's food banks, whether it's bin men, whether it's road sweepers, whether it's care workers, whether it's NHS, doctors, nurses, the lot. It's the People's Memorial. That's how I see it. And I think it should be something that's a symboliser of Ashfield and the potential that Ashfield has got, and how proud we are as councillors of the people of Ashfield for sticking by the council during this time.
Yeah, I think, you know, in 50 years' time, you know, it's funny because we were talking about statues the other day, because of course the council are committing £12,000 to renewing the statues of the 5 miners who died in the 50th Riley Forest Park and also Gallery. And you know, it's important, you know, in the future generation to be able to look back and remember those who gave so much. So just on another couple of items there, we just to do with the work programme, because one of the things, and it's something that Councillor Grounds touched on before, was, you know, small businesses across the district going over and beyond, and you know, we need to make sure that we are looking after the interests, because we have got exciting regeneration plans. You know, £50 million we're bidding up to for Sutton, £25 million for Kirkby. But it's important that we remember the small businesses who, you know, they've just kept the head above water. It's all well and good to say, oh, well, they've got 10 grand, but that, in a lot of cases, that just covered the quarterly rental bill. And, you know, it's important that you know, I see in a way, I see the future. I think this committee should be looking at the regeneration plans, not just for Sutton, not just for Kirkby, but also Hucknall as well. And we also need to be looking at how we can support existing residents. So, for example, do we look at working with the markets team to try and increase footfall into our town centres and having more thematic markets like plant markets or farmers markets, for example, to drive footfall. I know that would be especially popular in places like Hucknall. So maybe we need to look at that in the future. I think Mike's put small business and high street recovery. That's fine. Can we just add regeneration into that as well, Mike, please, if that's okay with members? The other thing that I wanted to have a look at was multi-agency working, because as has been documented in tonight's meeting, it's very clear that Ashfield District Council did an excellent job, you know, across many levels, but they couldn't have done it on their own. You know, there was the multi-agency working, whether it be the NHS, whether it be the CCG, whether it be the police or their emergency services, they all work together to make sure our residents are safe. And I'd like in a future meeting to invite some of these agencies to a subsequent meeting. So, for example, you know, I'd like to see Inspector Dixon, our new police inspector for the district, come to a meeting to discuss how they worked with the council's community protection team in order to maintain social distancing, and any lessons that we can learn for any second waves. You know, we can invite, as I say, Richard Mitchell and from the hospital. We can invite somebody from the county council, because what we need to make sure is that whilst we're celebrating good practice, and sometimes, you know, in politics it does feel like a bit of a backslapping exercise, but I've also said in a council meeting in November, we should never apologise for celebrating what this council do well, and I think there's a lot that we've done well. However, I think there is lessons that we can certainly learn as a council, as a multi-agency group, in order to be more effective if it comes to fighting a second wave. So multi-agency working will be something that I look at. Is there anything burning that that members want to see on a future agenda? And bearing in mind, I'm going to be Caroline in a second, bearing in mind that, you know, this is very, very fluid. You know, there may well be circumstances that dictate quick changes of agenda, but I'm sure you'll all appreciate that. Okay, Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't want to be pessimistic, but I'm actually thinking, could we have a look at looking, if we do actually have a second wave, of making sure that the general public are reinsured and don't get conflict of interest, you know, conflict of information, and keeping things simple for them, especially for the older generation, so we could have something in place. And then if we do have this horrible second wave, that everything's implemented, so we know what we're actually doing from day one, instead of fumbling around and trying to do a job where we haven't got guidelines set in.
I think, as Ruth indicated before, Councillor Wilkinson, you know, this was completely unprecedented. We had a meeting in the middle of March in the council chamber, and I couldn't quite believe what I was hearing. I spoke to the leader of the council early March, and I just genuinely thought he was exaggerating and banging a bit of VAT on what he was saying. But he was involved in public health discussions. He was involved in, you know, and a lot of these things were done on a way, and there was mistakes made. You know, I can cite the example of government issuing guidance about the closure of cemeteries, and this council following that guarantee, only for Robert Jenrick, the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government, saying the exact opposite the next day. But I'm fairly confident that, you know, the government, in the same way the council, and the same way multi-agencies, including the county and the police and etc., will learn lessons from it. But we've got to make sure that we don't just scrutinise what went right and slap and tap ourselves on the back and say job well done, but we also look at how we can improve our service to the Ashfield residents.
Yeah, thank you.
Is there anybody else, Mike?
Yeah, just to pick up on some of the points, Chair, and to clarify with the work plan. I think with when we're setting a theme for the work plan, that doesn't mean that we won't be looking at the continuous movement and the preparations for recovery or the risk of a second wave. So whilst we may have a focus on that agenda, that will not stop other items as they need to come on being also added to that agenda. I think what it was in terms of looking at some of those themes is trying to ensure that we cover as much ground as we can, and we focus on particularly those local recovery themes that are detailed within the report, that are also embedded within our corporate plan, and focus on some of those. But we can also have, it doesn't have to be a single item agenda. We can focus on some of the themes, and then you can say if there's a specific update or change in plans for recovery or for a second wave, or actually one of the other themes, you know, that will be in discussion with the panel and with the chair and vice chair. If that needs to be added onto an agenda, even though the work plan has a specific theme, the agenda needs to be flexible by its very nature, because it needs to be responsive and be able to be reactive to everything as it comes up.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mike. Is there any other comments on the work plan before we move on? So we're all agreed, Mike. If you just bring up the work plan document again, please. So we're all agreed that the next one we're looking at service heads. So could I formally request, Mike, that we send invitations out as soon as possible to, you know, the corporate finance manager, chief exec, other people for the next meeting, and then looking forward to the future. Maybe at the next meeting we can discuss, you know, bringing in, you know, if we're talking on the 6th of October, for example, if we're talking about small businesses and high street recovery, I would very much welcome actually speaking to small businesses, actually bringing a small business in from Sutton, Kirkby, Selston and Hucknall, and to talk about their experiences, just so we learn. So that's where we are with that. So just to go back, when we're going to, our next meeting is on the is it 15th of September? No, it was the 3rd of September, isn't it, Mike? 3rd of September. So it's at that meeting, as I say, we're going to have the service heads there. I'll continue meeting with my vice chair. We meet 3 or 4 times a week anyway to discuss issues. We'll make sure that you're kept abreast of any developments. And as I say, Councillor Shaw, I know you raised before that you didn't want to be surprised by a local lockdown. You'd appreciate a bit of notice. We'll make sure that we share as much intelligence as possible within this committee, of which you can then cascade that to your local members and your local community. So just to say that what we need to agree now, we've agreed the panel dates. Mike, if you just bring the work programme, the initial work programme, I'm going to ask for a vote on that. So if I propose it, can I have a seconder? Councillor Blagden, thank you. So we're going to vote on the initial work programme, whilst noting that it's fluid and that it may be subject to change, just to give us an idea. So those in favour of what we've discussed, Mike, if you just bring that up again, please. Okay, so that's what we're voting for. Okay, everyone's in favour, that's great. Is there anything else to add now to me? Is there anything else, Mike?
Thank you, Chair. And I think Shane wants to come in afterwards. I think I just wanted to also state to members of this panel that obviously along the way and during some of the work behind the scenes in between the meetings, I will be working, myself and Shane will be working with the chair, the vice chair, but also the rest of the panel. So we may be coming to you informally asking for your ideas, particularly around some of the engagement of the communities through social media and through our work with comms, whether that take the form of a an interactive meeting where we can have questions submitted to the meeting, whether we invite people to the meeting or whether there's a survey or whatever. So just to let members know that me and Shane will be in contact with you at regular points as members of this panel to seek your guidance and advice along the way of steering this into a constructive piece of work that will result in some tangible outcomes that we can take forward to Cabinet. If I can now, Chair, I'll bring Shane in.
Okay, Shane.
I was just scratching my head, but I'll come in anyway. I think it's been really positive that we've identified some areas to get started on straight away. Obviously, we keep reiterating that it's got to be fluid, and I think we'll really know a lot more about what this panel needs to focus on after our next meeting, and really asking some more detailed questions for each of the directors and the areas that they've been responsible for. I think Mike mentioned to me it's maybe worth focusing on some of these recovery themes that the council have identified, and to help us sort of identify our own areas, and they are health and happiness, homes and housing, cleaner and greener. They're detailed in the report, just to give us an idea of what to look for. I think it's good that we haven't maybe overloaded the work plan at this stage. We've got something to focus on for next meeting. Hopefully, if everyone can give some thought to some maybe specific questions to put to the directors at the next meeting, we've got plenty of lead-in time for that. I know I'll be thinking of my sort of trickiest questions to ask them, really put them on the spot. But thank you.
Thank you, Shane. Do we need to vote on the report to accept the report, Mike?
Sorry, Chair, I was just trying to unmute myself there. So within the report, essentially we've already voted on the establish a work programme with the initial focus and reviewing the council's initial response. So the other one was noting the information contained in the report. So we've already done that as part of this overall discussion. We've also set the actions going forward. So I'd probably suggest no, Chair. We're quite comfortable in taking this forward.
Okay, thank you very much. And can we thank Ruth Dennis for coming to the meeting today? Thank you, Ruth. It's very, very clear that you must be absolutely sick of meetings by now. Can I thank the Democratic Services team? Can I thank Lynn, Mike and Shane? And can I thank you all as well, every single member of the panel tonight contributed. In the meantime, as I say, please don't be strangers. Don't forget that Ruth's offer, I think I made that on her behalf, but if there's anything that Ruth can answer that you feel that's not been covered or it just strikes you, then please get in touch with Ruth. Thank you very much to everybody, and have a nice August. I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye.